I am Nisha Dupy and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I interview Alice Walker. Alice Walker is a legendary author and social activist. She is well known for Pulitzer Prize-winning novel The Color Purple, first published in 1982. In 1985, the book was recreated as a movie, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Oprah Winfrey as Sophia and Whoopi Goldberg as Celie.
All my life I had to fight. I had to fight my daddy, I had to fight my uncles, I had to fight my brothers. Girl, child ain't safe in the family men's. But I ain't never thought I had to fight in my own house. I loves Hopper. God knows I do. But I kill him dead before I let him beat me.
The Color Purple was transformative for a lot of individuals and is still celebrated as a literary masterpiece among other Alice Walker favorites, such as Taking the Arrow Out of the Heart, Possessing the Secret of Joy, and The Chicken Chronicles. I met with Alice Walker at this year's Anguilla Literary Festival, where she was the keynote speaker. In this interview, Dame Walker speaks about her challenges as a child.
I always wrote about people dying and being buried very deep.
Her relationship with her pet chickens.
So I named all of them. I learned to have them, I would sit down like this and they'd come and jump on my lap. And we would converse.
Okay. And Alice unapologetically shares her views on abortion.
We will end up being back in Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale, where women are basically just slaves.
Ladies and gentlemen, Alice Walker.
I am immensely grateful to be sitting here speaking with you, and I want to get right into it. Thank you for being on Anguilla. Yes. What compelled you to begin writing?
I think I was just a very solitary child, and I suffered, as children often do in childhood, and I began to see that I could find some solace in creating poetry, which I loved because in my little community, actually people loved poetry. I lived in Georgia and in the 40s and 50s. And people really read to their children. They remembered some of the poetry of Paul Laurence Dunbar, who was a poet unheard of in this century, actually. And so I knew that I could do that. And I discovered that it made me feel better.
Mm-hmm. Did you transfer some of that suffering to the poetry, and what specific type of suffering?
I always wrote about people dying and being buried very deep, and how tragic it was, and how people were weeping. It was all terrible, and very sad poetry. But it was what the universe gave me to help me deal with my own feelings of sorrow, and I welcomed it. And I luckily had people in the community who loved me, and some people in my family, and so I could show them, what I was doing eventually.
Okay.
And they, they were poetry lovers, and they understood. It was really amazing, really. I had an older sister who had gone away to school, and she brought back to us, poetry and literature in general.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I was listening to an interview that you did, and I loved the way that you said, I was interested in other things, but what I could afford was pen and paper. Mm-hmm. And it transcended into such rich experiences for you as a writer. Can you share some of those experiences?
Once I realized that I couldn't afford the paint, and I couldn't afford the canvas, and that I could maybe afford, a pencil and some very inexpensive paper, I realized that in a way that was adequate, and it was also a kind of sincere area for me to work in, because I come from a poor family. We didn't think we were poor, but we were poor. Okay. And so to actually have pen and paper, or pencil and paper, was really the correct thing for that situation. I didn't realize that then. So it was a way to further learn that where I was placed in this world, with the parents that I had, with the near poverty that we had, I could still create what I needed to out of very simple tools. And this is something that artists should try to, understand early. Because often, believe it or not, many people are very creative, but they really believe they can't afford to be, because they can't get some, kind of high fashion gadget that they think they have to have in order to be a creative. You don't really. You can figure out a way to be creative with whatever modest thing that you have. If it's just, some sticks, that you learn how to make frames out of or something. I mean, I was able to work with what I could afford.
I like that. Very meaningful. When you were getting into your creative endeavors, were there any spiritual practices that you engaged in to help to channel that energy?
Solitude. Solitude is still my preferred mode of being. I live very far in the country, even to this day. I love to be alone. I have a little dog at the moment, and I love having, partners from time to time. But essentially, I really enjoy solitude. It's an amazing, rich, depthful situation. And there again, I wish more people could have it, because unfortunately, they were born with the TV on, and they were born with the radio going, and so they actually don't have a clue that behind that is just this vast eternity of richness, that comes out of silence. Silence is not empty, silence is full.
And how would you define solitude for us?
Solitude is when I'm on my 40 acres in the country, working in my garden. We were supposed to be given 40 acres and a mule as compensation for having been enslaved for 240 years. They didn't do that. So when I got some money, I bought myself my own 40 acres and a rototiller. And I have spent many, many years. I travel everywhere also, but when I'm in solitude, I'm there on this land. And until very recently, I basically did all of the gardening, which was wonderful.
Okay.
I had collard green leaves as big as this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's very southern, isn't it? Collard green
very.
and what? What did we...
Well, turnips and corn and tomatoes, and I have chickens. I still have chickens.
Yeah, you have the Chicken Chronicles. Is that
Right.
inspired by your own chickens?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah?
Well, I was in Bali for, I used to love Bali. They've wrecked it by now, but anyhow, it used to be amazing. And I was coming back from a fire dance, and I was walking down the road with my partner, and I think my daughter was somewhere, with us. But I saw a chicken crossing the road, and it really struck me that I had not, in the last 25 years or so, really looked at a chicken. And what did that say about me? It said I was really out of touch, and I didn't like that. And so I felt really inspired to talk to my neighbors and my friends and my partner, and to ask them if they'd help me raise some chickens, because I needed to reconnect with the chickens that I had known as a child and as a girl, because they were so integral to our lives. If we didn't have the chickens, we would have starved half the time. We had to have them, and they were also fascinating in their own right. Because that's what you learn when you take the time, that everything is really alive, everything has got its own story. Everything is endlessly fascinating if you just take the time to pay attention. So even in solitude, I'm not alone. I mean, there are the ancestral spirits who are with us. We are sensible enough to really invite them. But then there are the animals, who truly are amazing teachers. They're wonderful. For instance, I was a vegetarian, really a vegan at one point. But I was trying really hard. And then sitting there with my chickens, and I wasn't eating chicken at all. But as I sat with them, I realized that chickens are not vegetarians. That if I had fallen dead right there in the middle of the coop, they would have eaten me. And this was, it was very interesting, because it took me out of that fanciful place you can get where you think you're doing something that's so,
noble or respectable.
yeah. I mean, and I'm not knocking it. It's wonderful. But you do have to realize that everything eats something. So that even if you're eating just vegetables, they cleared that land of millions of animals in order to grow the vegetables. The reality is really important.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
What is your take on the current abortion law?
That law, if it spreads across the country, because as I understand it, you can go to prison for so many years if you have an abortion when there's a heartbeat, a discernible, a hearable heartbeat. This is a terrible law. Women should not stand for it. I mean, they should just do whatever, they should be collecting in circles all over the planet because often what happens in America spreads, So if we want to keep control of our bodies, and why shouldn't we, since they're ours, we have to actually come together and plan our moves. I mean, how do we fight this? I mean, do we get together and hire the very best lawyers to go through the courts? I mean, that would be good. That would be part of it. But also take to the streets. I mean, we can't have it. We will not survive if we have a law that puts us in prison for having an abortion. I mean, we've been there before.
I mean, why do they not understand, or why do they feel that they have a right to sort of dictate what a woman can do with her womb and what she cannot do?
Well, because that's the kind of people that they are. And they've always been that way. I mean, not every single person, obviously, but the system favors men in the sense that, they get to control things. I mean, they have been controlling things for about 6,000 years at least, And so they just feel like that's the way it is, and also that even though it's a woman's body, it's, quote, their seed that's in there, and they get to, but actually a woman has a right, as they would have a right. If you made a man pregnant, and then you told him, you're pregnant, and there's nothing you can do about it, you're going to have to, have this, whatever it is, and it may hurt like hell giving birth and blah, 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 but that's just how it is, I mean, if you did that, and if you could actually see that through, men would revolt. They would. Of course they would. I mean, because it's a limit to their freedom, just as it is a limit to women's freedom. I mean, you can have a baby if you want one, but if you don't want one, why have one?
Yeah. And what do you say to women or girls who are being taught that it's not respectful to do so, that it's a sin or a crime?
Well, you know what sin actually means, the verb to sin, okay. It actually means to be yourself.
Oh.
That's what it is. And that's why churches and other organizations like that tell you that you're sinning. Basically what they're saying is you're being yourself, and God doesn't like that.
Oh. I never thought of it that way before.
Well, you've never probably seen it, studied it down to the root of what it actually means. But that's what sin is. It's being who you are and being what you are and how you are. But church doesn't like that. Synagogue doesn't like that. Pentecostals don't like that. Whoever. But basically, you have a right to be yourself. You do. I mean, you don't think the trees and the daffodils and everything else is waiting for somebody to tell them how to be who they are or what they are? No.
How did you learn, or if you had to learn at all, to be this authentic and honest?
Because I noticed that I didn't see a single pine tree or a single peach tree or a single rose or a single sunflower begging anybody's permission to be who they are and what they are. Not one. Yeah. And why should I be different?
You're right. Do you have any messages for the young ladies who are listening?
Well, fight for your future, because if you don't really fight for it, you won't have one.
Okay. What do you make of the Anguilla Lit Fest? You came. Did you enjoy your time while here?
I've had a wonderful time. I have really enjoyed it. I have loved the people.
We have a lot of admiration for you. Thank you for gifting us with your work and your creativity.
You're welcome.
We're better for it.
Good. Thank you.
Hugs. Thank you.
Yeah. No.